Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. I hope all of you are having a great day and, well, hey, we can make it a little bit better with, of course, our All Linux show. That's right. We have the one, the only Marcel Gagne, Cooking with Linux, joining us to talk, Linux topics. And Linux topics and more here on Computer America. So if you are just, hey, fresh to the show, I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and we have a great show planned for you today. But before we get to our scheduled guests and before we get to Linux and all that goodness, a few things I have to mention, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from the show notes, which have, everything that we talk about here today, be it articles, videos, products, distributions, anything like that can be found in the show notes for your convenience. Also, be sure to check out the social media contest sponsored by Logitech. Going to give away a prize tomorrow, as in every Friday. And also, be sure to check out the live video portion where you can watch Computer America and not just listen. Adds another element to what we do here on the program. So, just run through that quickly, and to introduce our guest, once again, Marcel Gagne, regular correspondent here for Computer America, and of course, runs Cooking with Linux. Marcel, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Not too shabby. Yes. Happy to have you back on, and excited to have you back on because, hey, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Of all the fans here on Computer America, I can say without a doubt, from gaming to Microsoft to Apple fans, Linux fans are the most, I won't say, like, ravenous puts an animalistic tone on it, but the most passionate, I think, are the Linux fans.
I can appreciate that. There's a lot of passion in the whole open source, open source community, open source philosophy. Because a lot of the people who got involved in that didn't get involved because it was gonna pay them a huge salary somewhere. They got involved because there was an idea and a philosophy that they could get behind, that they could get excited about. And so I'm not surprised that's the case. I'm really not. So
right.
So I love those people. I do. They're my family. I love them.
Right. And, they, of course, they love listening to, our once a month. If, again, we do this every single month. And yeah, so we are here to talk about Linux and all its forms, all of its tentacles that are wrapping itself. Yeah, I said tentacles. Wrapping itself around the earth because, we have a couple of stories here, such as the one that you suggested about how, let's face it, the most powerful hardware in the world is run on Linux. So,
yes, Linux world domination has been going right on schedule for quite a long time now, and I'm happy
without
to say
anyone noticing. It's great.
Well, it really is kind of without anybody noticing. Somewhere along the way, they changed. It wasn't just Linux. People started thinking of Ubuntu as just Ubuntu, without realizing that it was a Linux distribution. And then there was Android, and it's like, well, I've got an Android phone without realizing you're running a Linux phone. And then you've got your thermostats and your smart TVs and, Google and Amazon, who all run whose entire operations run on Linux. And you don't stop to think for a minute because it's sort of like invisible. Okay. Guys like me run Linux on the desktop, obviously, but everybody out there who's listening, who is running on a Mac or who's running on a Windows PC or something like that, you're using Linux too every single day. Every time you search a page on the web, you're using Linux. Every time you order a package from Amazon, you're using Linux. Every time you're watching Netflix, you're using Linux. Every time you send an email message, you're using Linux. It's just kind of like it's invisible now. And the news that you're alluding to is that the top 500 supercomputers in the world all run Linux now, all of them. So it's kind of like, if we were joking about this before the show started, it's like it's possible, I suppose, that supercomputer 501 runs something else, but it's like, who cares? You
Yeah,
know?
and supercomputers are these things that, they're in basements, they're in, just warehouses that run these huge server farms and blah, blah, blah. And, the average everyday person doesn't really run them, but you can see their power when it comes to predicting hurricane paths, when it comes to predicting weather and climate and, just directing so much, like these huge processes. And, for, probably for the better, I guess Linux has a way of being a little bit more stable where you don't get that blue screen of death and you ruin, millions of dollars worth of time and energy and effort and projects. I mean, let's just
Well,
start off by saying this. What
yeah,
makes Linux the preferred operating system for these? Do you have any inkling?
oh, I mean, there's tons of stuff. I mean, it isn't even just stability. I mean, stability is obviously a factor. Security is a factor, which isn't to say that it's 100% secure. I mean, we go back to this whole thing about, if the, you got to change the locks from time to time to keep things secure, and the same is true even in the Linux world. But the one of the biggest things is that it's open. You can modify it to suit your needs. And if you're running like a massive render farm in Hollywood or something like that, so you can spin off the latest Justice League movie, which, I'm really looking forward to seeing. I don't know about you, but I am just like, I am on the edge of my seat for this one.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know that's not what we're talking about. If you, if you watch one of these movies, you're watching the product of, a massive Linux render farm, putting all these really cool special effects together. So it's like everywhere you look, it's in everything that you do. It's, it's in all the stuff you watch. It's in these artificial intelligence products, that you buy. It's in your smartwatch, it's on your phone. It's the, these days often it's the microcode that boots up before your PC boots up. So even if you've got a Linux, so even if you got a Windows PC, it's booting up a small Linux kernel before it boots up into Windows. So it's like, it has become invisible, and it truly is everywhere these days. But of course, the one place that it isn't everywhere is on the desktop. And, like I said, people like me are running Linux on the desktop because we're taking advantage of that power and that flexibility that you don't get when you're running a proprietary operating system like Mac or, or any kind of a Windows desktop. You get that.
Well, yeah, and it was, earlier this year, last year. Time flies so quickly when so many crazy things are going on in the world. But Windows had kicked the command line for,
Mhm.
and you know better than I do, the shell, Linux something shell.
Yeah, the Born Shell. Yeah, the BASH, the Born Again Shell is what it stands for, actually, BASH.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So even large, large organizations, such as Microsoft, they not only see the value in it, but they're, like you said, some of their largest contributors to these projects and these open source projects because, hey, it works better than just trying to pay
It
every single
does.
little
It
person.
does. There may be and I'm not. This isn't the point that I'm going to try to argue at this
Right.
moment. It may be more valuable for a company to attach themselves to a closed source product like Microsoft. It obviously is lucrative because Microsoft didn't do too badly for themselves, and
Right.
neither did the founder Bill Gates. But the fact of the matter is, an open development philosophy and an open development methodology just creates better product. The other one may be economically, more valuable to the company that holds on to it. It may be, or it may not be. I mean, not every company out there becomes a Microsoft, but it doesn't change the fact that the better product is always the product of open development. It just always is, and that's a lesson that is sometimes hard to grasp if you're not coming at. I mean, if you're coming at it from, if you'll pardon the expression, a traditional closed source model.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but there's no question that you wind up with a better product with much more flexibility, and of course the ability to tailor it to what you want. Which, like I said, if you're running like a big render farm, or you're running, atmospheric prediction models on a supercomputer or something like that, you want to be able to modify and muck about with this thing at a level that something in a shrink wrap package will never deliver for you.
Right. So I'm just trying to read through this article here. It looks like Linux first appeared in the top 500 in 1998. So I guess before that, they were probably running. Let's see, Beowulf. I
Oh,
don't
well,
know
yeah.
what
I mean,
Beowulf is.
Beowulf clusters were sometimes running on Linux as well. So I mean, the
Yeah.
Beowulf clusters were a way of building clusters. But I mean, if you go back far enough, oh, what was that company? Oh, I'm trying to figure out. They had the coolest. I mean, in terms of actual hardware.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can't believe it's right here on the tip of my tongue. They had these really cool Cray supercomputers.
Oh
If you go
yeah.
back far enough, we had Cray, and those were awesome looking beasts. It doesn't change the fact that what we've got today outperforms any of those things. Outdoes any of those things, but they looked so cool. I mean, Google it. Bring up a picture.
I did. I did. I have them all right here. They kind of look like, oh, I've seen benches at, dressing rooms kind of look like these, but they're circular. You could step inside, have like a little pod in the middle where you could work on the wiring, but no, very aesthetically pleasing.
Oh, they were sexy beasts. Like they were just like gorgeous machines. And I mean there's they have the ones, the ones that line up the whole rows of them or something like that. But the circular one, the circular Cray was just this cool, super cool, awesomely neat machine. And I mean we've passed that. We're long past that, but there was a time when you could look at, we're walking into one of these computer rooms, one of these supercomputer rooms. It was like walking on a science fiction movie set. And of course, now your science fiction movie set is your smartphone with Google Assistant.
Right. Yeah. So I was reading the article, and they chalk it up to the fact that the top 500 supercomputers are running Linux. The first one, because of your point earlier, they're completely customizable, or at least no one wants to design a fork of Windows or Apple or Macintosh or whatever, just specifically designed to run a singular task for all these computers. So that's where Linux comes in. And I guess it's kind of like playing with Legos, where you may only need half of your specialized Legos, and instead of having to buy the whole kit, you just go out and rent the Legos that you need, Legos being Linux, and build it up. And there you go. You have a very specialized, finely tuned operating system that is Linux based. So
Yeah, and people have built supercomputers out of there have been some. I remember one supercomputer system just a few years ago that was built entirely out of PS3s. It was like 250
Oh,
PS3s.
you just gave me the worst flashback to the worst movie I've ever seen,
Oh,
and
go ahead.
I don't know if we talked about it. You and I probably have talked about it. Chappie. Chappie. It
I
was a
haven't seen
movie.
it. I haven't seen it. We did talk about it, but I have not yet seen it.
Yeah, don't bother. It is atrocious because like Chappie, like part of the I don't even care about spoiling it at this point. It's like 5 years old. Chappie at this point,
Oh, it's 5 years old now.
yeah, it's something like that. He designs consciousness on a computer, which by the way, not even the best supercomputer can do, by strapping together like 7 PlayStation 3s he shoplifted. And part of it's just I'm sure PlayStation paid them to product placement their thing, but to imagine that you could take 7 PlayStation 3s and render consciousness of a person inside of it is it was just like suspension of disbelief is one thing, but that was just a whatever.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
You
so
forced me. You forced me to share another bad movie with you.
go for it. Go for it. Tit for
Okay,
tat. Go for it.
this is an artificial intelligence movie. Okay, you know what's really bad is I'm going to tell you this is a bad movie. I'm prefacing it by telling you it's a bad movie, but I'm also going to point out that I like this movie. I have gone back and watched it a few times because there's something just I don't know innocent about it. About the time that it was made, and it's called Electric Dreams, and it's like from the 80s, and it's about this guy who goes out and he buys himself he goes to like your local computer store and he buys like an IBM PC. So it's nothing, like a generic IBM PC box. So it's nothing special. And he's trying to set it up because, he wants to get organized. This is the premise of the movie. He wants to get organized and he winds up spilling a bottle of Coke or something like that on the keyboard. I forget what. And this causes a bunch of zaps inside the system and the PC develops an intelligence. Okay.
Yes, yes,
Um,
because we're one spill drink away from accidentally starting up
we
Skynet,
are, we
right?
are, and the movie, the music behind it is Boy George and Culture Club.
No idea.
And for all the jokes about Boy George and Culture Club, that man was a stellar musician. He was a talent. I mean, he truly was. Uh, and the movie is all Culture Club's music in the background. And but like I said, it's just really cute, really kind of tender. The computer, Miles, the guy who has this computer who develops a personality, falls in love with the girl upstairs who plays the cello.
Hmm.
So there's this part where the computer plays jams with her on the cello, and it goes back and forth and back and forth, and it's just lovely. It's like this lovely, lovely scene because the computer falls in love with the girl, and he
Hmm.
becomes jealous of Miles, who gets the girl precisely because the computer acts like Cyrano de Bergerac. So in a way, it's kind of a Cyrano de Bergerac. The computer gives him all the good lines and does the music
Oh
for him. And,
yeah.
it's a bad movie, but it's worth sitting
I
down to
yeah.
watch it.
I tried to Google it. I tried to find it, and tried to look it up, but unfortunately could not find it because it is buried under article after article of Philip K. Dick's Electric Dreams being adapted into a television show in 2018, coming to Amazon Video.
Oh,
So
get out! Seriously?
I'm serious. So that's going to be coming out next year. Its own, I think it's like 10 episodes that they're not really a series. It's like a 10
Oh, yeah. So
episodic
it's gonna be
thing.
it's gonna be like a modern Blade Runner. It's gonna
Yeah.
ride off the coattails of Blade Runner. All
Yeah.
right,
So
all right. We'll
So yeah,
see.
so it's coming along. So anyways, so down the path of just wonky fiction, but what we do have here with the supercomputers, getting back to what we were talking about. So the first reason all Linux are running on supercomputers is that they're highly customizable, and this helps people. You can speak to this. How does this same aspect help people who want to run it at home? For their systems. Because I know that you can run this on old systems, on modern systems. How does this customizability help everyday users?
Well, for the average user at home, I mean, the biggest thing that it's got going for it for the average user at home is, especially if you're trying to introduce your kid to computers, and that dovetails into another discussion you and I were having.
Hmm.
But if you try to introduce somebody to computers and you want them to learn programming, or you want them to learn, a particular type of software or whatever, it's never about, if you want to be in a position 5 years from now where you can say, I know something about using a word processor, it's not going to do you any good to say, oh yeah, I was like, I was awesome working with what's the word 2000, whatever the last version was, 2012, I think it was.
Right.
Okay. So it's like, it's not going to do you any good to say, well, back in 2012, I realize it's 2020 today, but I was awesome with Word 2000. Well, it's not going to help you at all. But if you know how to use a word processor, okay, it doesn't matter which word processor you learn how to use. I mean, you know what a word processor is. You know how the basic functionality of all this stuff works. Well, in the Linux world, you've got equivalent software for just about everything, and of course, a lot of it now has become the de facto software. A favorite of yours and mine is OBS,
Hmm.
Open Broadcasting System, and or OBS Studio as it's called sometimes, and it's an open source piece of software that is practically the de facto desktop recording and streaming software now. And it's a completely open source package. It's a completely free open source package. You can go out and buy some, or buy subscriptions to another package. And I believe you did at one
Which I
time.
did, yeah.
Yeah. And, but,
And just first off,
yeah,
the main difference I really found, or at least the immediate difference, was when I was looking for a certain feature, I'd take it to the forums, I'd post my grievance, and they'd say, oh, that's a good idea, we're looking to implement this in the future, or no, we're not really looking to work on this project, unfortunately that's not on our radar, something like that, something PR candid. And then I went to OBS because I was looking for another feature, and the response I found there, luckily I didn't have someone else posted it, but they're like, because it's open source, they're like, we'd like to be able to, it was something about the webcam and being able to kind of host a virtual webcam, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, do you want to do it? And the guy's just like, no, I want you developers to do it. It's like, it's open source. If you want it to happen, you go make it happen. Otherwise, get off her back.
Well, often it isn't just a question of they don't want to make it happen. It's a question of how quickly do you want it.
They said it was so complicated that they didn't want to take it on, but that was their choice. Is that, as open source and developers, they get to choose what they want to work
Yeah.
on, and if you want something to happen, you go do it, and that's cool.
Yeah, and of course, as you know, there are ways around that. I mean, there are ways around using using a webcam, and
Right.
you've probably figured it out at this point. But yeah, it is customizable, and there are forks of projects like that all the time. At the moment, I'm going through a little bit of personal pain and suffering with an Android email client, and I went back and I took a look at the open source email clients. The one I was using was called Alto, which was actually a really nice piece of software. But as happens with closed source systems like that, you have there's no requirement that anybody is going to keep it going. And even if a lot
Right.
of people like it, in the case of Alto, there were like thousands and thousands and thousands. I don't know how many thousands of people, because there were I think like 1 million downloads or something like that of the stupid package. But no, some other company bought it and then they've closed it down. So it's like, mid-December, it's like, we're done here.
I see
So
that.
that
Yeah.
what you get from a closed source package, it is there's no guarantee that an open source project will continue into the future. But if you are a company that is invested in a particular product and it's an open source product, you have the opportunity to keep it going. In the case of Alto, this email package that I thought was really awesome, I have no alternative. They just closed the door on me and everybody else in the world and said, screw you.
Mhm.
And we've been bought by somebody else. They have no interest in continuing this, or they're going to try to monetize it in some other way. But sorry, dudes, find something else to use. And that's not something that happens in the open source world. If you really desperately need to use this particular package, or there are enough of you who use a particular package or a particular piece of software, you can bet that there's going to be a number of people that are going to take this proverbial bull by its proverbial horns, and continue developing and continue working with it. And it may be a fork of the original product. It doesn't really matter. The point is they're going to say, okay, we're going to take everything that was cool about this, and then we're going to start adding functionality, or continue developing it or supporting it for more modern hardware and so forth. That's the kind of stuff that you get when you're dealing with open source that you don't get with closed source. Closed source, it's like, oh well, this big company behind it. Company
Yeah.
can close the door anytime they want.
Right. That's something that I've heard brought up about Windows XP, and the fact that so much of the business world, corporate world, XP was standard, and still is, unfortunately, even with all the security flaws and so on and so forth, that it's unsupported by Microsoft. They said it. They stopped support 5 years after they said they would stop. But if they had turned it over to the open source community and they allowed them to essentially keep developing it, Microsoft would just kind of go hands off, say, hey, we're not going to support this, but others can. Then, a lot of these hacks that we hear about probably could be prevented, because these XPs, they could then be updated to, not official Microsoft releases, but at least secure open source releases at some point, right?
Yeah, well, and of course, if you really desperately want to, what you can do is you can just install Linux on those old PCs and continue
Right.
on with your life, and have a better, experience than you had before with a completely different operating system. The idea that, oh well, I have to learn something completely new is complete bollocks, because you see what I did there? I just stole from Brits. Uh,
Well, and that's who I was referencing. The National Health Services, they were all running Windows XP. Many Fortune
yes.
500 companies were running XP. These companies that they don't feel the need, or they feel it's too complicated to implement a large scale Linux, in their companies.
Nevertheless, we're being forced to implement a large-scale withdrawal of the hardware that they had to be replaced by something new.
True.
So,
True.
it's like, how do you want to take that? Do you want to take that punch to the head, or do you want to take it to the gut? Pick one.
Right. And to wrap up our point, because we're about to spend half the show on just, kind of beating around this 500 supercomputer thing, the second part that makes Linux so attractive for supercomputers is the fact that it's, no other way to put it, inexpensive, cheap.
Well, absolutely.
It's, when you have to install this much software on so many computers, you're not going to pay someone to design all of it, and you're not going to pay royalties or fees to anyone if it's open source, and they make it so, if you find a free distribution, hey, free is the best price ever. So
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, I mean, if you're putting a computer in your house, you said, what would be the advantage? And I said, so let's say you've got a kid and you're trying to teach them how to program. You want them to get their hands dirty in the in the programming world and so forth. Well, a Linux system will come with a free C compiler, a free Python development environment, a free Node.js development environment, a free take your pick development environment. It's all there. I mean, it's all available on your system. You can sit down and start to learn these things included in a distribution that costs you absolutely nothing other than the time to sit down and get used to the fact that things might have different names than what you're used to, and you've opened the door without having to buy all this additional software. Some of that stuff is damned expensive if you want to get into it.
my first year of my computer science main courses, just programming in C, something that's decades old at this point.
Yep.
$2,000 between tuition, course, book, and actually buying. I think they made us buy a compiler from Adobe. So yeah, thousands if you do it at a university.
Well, there's a C++ compiler on my computer here, and it was included on the on the free DVD that I
Just for the
installed
heck
my
of it.
distribution on. So
Right. So and you're right. So again, I kind of wanted to wrap that up there. And before we move on to our next topic, one that we normally do at the beginning of the show, and that is, hey, the wine of the day, because you have been sipping on it. You have been punctuating your statements here on the show with it. Tell people why wine, and second of all, what wine?
Well, first of all, why wine? It goes back to my Cooking with Linux column that I did in the Linux Journal way back when, a million years ago, where I impersonated a French chef who ran a restaurant in an undisclosed location, which just happened to have the second best wine cellar in the entire world. I never actually explained who had the best, but I kept claiming that I had the second best wine cellar in the entire world. And I had a waiter named François who I would send down to my expansive, not necessarily expensive, although I'm sure it was as well, but expansive wine cellar to go get the wine for each of the articles that I would write. And so we have kept this going when we do the show here, because I like wine. It gives me an excuse to have a glass of wine while we do the show. And for anybody who's actually wondering out there, I'm actually not drunk. This is actually my first glass, and as you can tell, it's not empty yet.
Right.
But today I am drinking a 2016 Connoisseur Bicicleta. This is it's a lovely little wine. Is this a Chilean? It's a Shiraz, this one. But I believe this is a Chilean wine. Let me see. Wines of Chile. Yes, of course. I just want to make sure it wasn't Argentinian. But yes, it's a Chilean wine, Connoisseur Bicicleta. There are several of these. This one is the Shiraz. I don't think I've actually tried the Shiraz before. But it's a Shiraz. It's a nice deep red with the peppery hints that you get when you do drink a Shiraz.
He's tasting it.
Dark fruit plum, very dry, not a particularly long finish, but a nice, easy drinking Shiraz. So I'd recommend this one. Check it out.
According to the winemaker notes, because hey, we have Google, so we can have those. They said it exhibits a good intensity of red fruit, cherry, and raspberry. But of course, everyone's tongue.
I would deny the raspberry. Actually, I could go with the cherries, but I'm going to stick to my black plum here.
Right. But again, another thing that we like about these wines is that they're not always, they're not always the $35 bottle wine, $70, $100. This one is relatively inexpensive.
It is. It is. Actually, I have this thing about wine. It goes something like this. It goes, for your every evening, for, your evening wine, everyday wine, it's like I want something which is basically under $10. Once a week, I'm willing to have something which is $15 to $20 or something like that. So I'll go a little crazier for the weekend for one weekend bottle, and then once a month or so, we treat ourselves to something a little bit more expensive. I'm not talking like $100 bottles here, but I'll spend $30, $35 on a bottle once a month just to try something that's a little bit more upscale. But the fact is, there are a lot of really good inexpensive wines. Yeah, there are things that if you want to try a wine from a particular vintner somewhere and you're curious to see what it's like, yeah, it'll cost you a little bit more.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be much better.
Right. And right there, I'm going to have to cut you off. And everyone, music means we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. More Marcel Gagne and more Linux talk when we come back here at Computer America.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 31 minutes past the hour as we continue on here with the one, the only Mr. Marcel Gagne. And of course, Cooking with Linux, our all Linux show here on Computer America, happens monthly, folks, if you aren't paying attention. And yeah, and of course, like I said, something I really wanted to point out was that we're going to have show notes. So after the show, if you want to check it out, any wine that we talk about, any product or distributions we're about to talk about can be found in the show notes very simply for you. So, Marcel, with that being said, there's a couple of things I really wanted to cover today. Some you brought up, including your distribution that you are currently trying out. Another is something that I did not discuss with you earlier. I probably should have. Are you still a fan of Mozilla Firefox by any chance?
Yeah, I still use it.
Sorry. Oh, wait. One second. There we go. I had you muted. There we go. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I had you muted. I had you muted. It was my bad.
Sorry, what was that? I have no idea. I have no idea what's happening here. I don't know what's happened. Yeah, no, I still use Firefox. I know there's a brand new version believe it or not, I have not tried the brand new version. But I do use Mozilla fairly regularly. I also use Chrome regularly. Mm-hmm. Typically, I have both open on my desktop. Which I know sounds weird, but you have to sort of imagine what my Linux desktop looks like. Maybe I should send you a screenshot just that you're aware of it.
That sounds like putting two cats in a bag. That doesn't sound like it would turn out well.
Well,
for anyone.
But it works. It works. So what happens is I actually have two different
personalities.
I have multiple windows. One of the things that's kind of hard to get used to when you're coming from the Windows world is how you've got the taskbar at the bottom, mm-hmm. and it shows like every darn thing that you've got running out there. Mm-hmm. Well, in the Linux world, on most Linux desktops, you have desktop switchers. So you'll have multiple desktops, basically. So what you have to think about is let's say that you've got your one screen. I've got my laptop, my 17-inch screen here. I also have a virtual 17-inch screen above it. And then my virtual 17-inch screen goes 4 screens in that direction and 4 screens below. So I actually have 8 screens that I have things laid out in various ways that I can switch back and forth depending on what it is that I happen to be doing at any given moment. So this is typically the sort of thing that I do. And because Firefox does behave a little bit differently than Chrome does. And frankly, there are sites where I find that Firefox works better than Chrome. And there are places where Chrome is more suitable, especially, for instance, if I'm trying to work on anything Google. Trying to work from Mozilla is not the best thing. So I have Chrome for anything that's Google related. And for a lot of other things, I have Mozilla sitting on the other side. So I have the two browsers running pretty much all the time. But you asked me about Mozilla. You said, are you still a fan of Mozilla? So presumably you were leading up to something.
Yeah, that was the fact that Mozilla Firefox 57, or as they want to dub it, Firefox Quantum, was the latest release. And from a lot of things I've heard, a lot of the CSS and how it's processed in the background, essentially a lot of the underpinnings of what Mozilla Firefox is have been revamped in this one. So they claim in a lot of situations it actually uses much less CPU, or processing power than Chrome or any other processor out there. So if you're strict on things like battery life for laptops and things like that, or if you're just a fan of faster running browsers, supposedly. And again, I haven't personally tried this out. I'm just buying into the hype, but they say that Firefox 57 is going to be your browser.
Well, their argument is that I believe the argument. I mean, I read this a couple of days ago when they were announcing it, or a few days ago when they were announcing it, and they're talking twice as fast for page loads.
Mhm.
So that's hey,
As compared to Firefox a year ago, as compared to itself
yeah,
1 year ago.
yes, of course, and
Right.
30% less CPU at twice the speed.
Right.
So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And no, I haven't actually tried it, but if you wanna pin me against the wall and say, Marcel, I want you to try this so that we can discuss this next time, I'm happy to do it.
Well, it's just the thing is that, in a lot of Linux distributions, I'm sure Chrome is making its way in there, but Firefox has, kind of been the open source choice for a browser. It certainly has been like Internet Explorer for a long time. Firefox was, in a lot of cases, just, the browser for Linux.
Okay, I'm going to give you a link here, just something to play with. Okay,
Sure.
and this will, believe it or not, this will slide in very nicely. Here we go with the segues. I love a good segue. Don't you love a good segue? I love it when a plan
Hmm.
comes together.
Go
You know,
for it.
you probably don't even know where that comes from. I love it when a plan comes together.
No.
Oh, you're gonna have to Google that, dude. Anyway.
But yeah, so segue.
A team, buddy. It's the A team. Anyway,
Um,
so the distribution I'm using at the moment, and we'll talk about my distribution in a moment, came with a version of Mozilla. Okay,
mhm.
a version of Mozilla. One of the cool things about Firefox and a lot of these packages, and in fact, Chrome has an open source base. There's a Chromium browser,
Yeah.
which doesn't include any of the the extensions that Google thinks should be in it. Is also available for in the Linux world. But in the version that I've got, there's a browser called Qupzilla, Qupzilla, and it's qupzilla.com, and I can paste it into our little discussion window here so that you can take a look at it. There we go.
I got it.
There it is.
Yeah.
Oh, you got it. Geez,
Mhm.
aren't you good? You are like awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Anyway, Cupzilla is actually a more lightweight version. Here we go with the idea of how can I make this more lightweight, faster, and so forth. So they came up with a lightweight, multi-platform version of the Mozilla browser, and of course, Mozilla is a multi-platform browser. So there you go.
I
And
got you.
that one is included in the distribution that I'm using at the moment, and the distribution that I just switched to just recently. Because as people know, if you've listened to me on this show or on my videos or anywhere else where I occasionally talk about these things, I can't commit to one distribution for any length of time. So of course I've switched again. I don't know how many months it's been since I was running the last one, but I suspect it's less than 6 months, and now I have switched to yet a new Linux distribution. Which is actually one of the cool things about a Linux distribution is you can have all your data in its own little partition, and then you can switch distributions and go on with your life without having to worry about it. It's one of those things that I absolutely adore about running Linux that I could never do in Windows or Mac. I mean, that opportunity, that option does not exist for me in those things. But in the Linux world, it's like, hey, I want to try something different. But I want to keep my data and I would continue working with the tools that I'm used to working with. No problem. You can do that. So that is one of the big pluses about running a Linux distribution that I probably don't hype enough. But yeah, Cupzilla is just a fork of Mozilla, of the Firefox browser. And what's really cool is if you go to the page, take a look at the top right on the page. What does it say?
Fork me on GitHub.
See?
Which I thought was profanity, and the first time I looked at it, I'm like, do I have to censor that? But no, forking is fine here on Computer America. It's fine.
You're allowed to fork. Forking in the computer world is done all the time.
Absolutely.
It's like fork me on GitHub. You're allowed to say that. It's not rude or anything. And if you think it's rude, then it's because you have a dirty mind, and I'm sorry.
Right, but you're right. Anyone has access to it, and if you want to customize it even in a little bit different way, then hey, they give you the option.
So you've got this project where they said, "Hey, we've come up with a better Mozilla, a skinnier, faster, cleaner version of Firefox. And here it is. We've come up with it. Oh, by the way, why don't you just go ahead and make your own version while you're at it? Why not?
Right. So, okay, so Cubzilla is the browser that comes with Manjaro. Now, a lot of the distributions you come on here with.
You give it away. You give it away. Oh, man.
Well.
I was going for the big reveal.
Please do your big reveal. I'm sorry. Everyone, no one remembers that. Go ahead.
You just blew it. You go ahead and say it.
What, Manjaro?
Exactly. I just switched to Manjaro. In fact, what I did was I switched to the development version, which is 17.1-2 at the moment, or something crazy like that. And I wanted like a very different experience from what I've been running in the past. And I sort of attempted to go down this road before when I was using Netrunner, and it turns out that the version of Netrunner that I picked up was one that was based on Ubuntu. So in the end, I hadn't actually really changed much of anything in that respect. So this time around, I made a willful decision to dramatically alter the distribution that I'm running to something that's not RPM based, that's not Debian based, like Ubuntu or like Fedora. Fedora obviously is the one that's RPM based, Fedora/Red Hat. So I decided to take something completely different, just completely different tack. And for about the last 5-6 days or so, maybe a week now, I've been running Manjaro. And it's kind of neat, being taken out of my comfort zone and using tools that are just a wee bit different than what I'm used to, especially when it comes to installing software. I mean, that's where it's where it's a big departure, is when you're installing software.
So
I had a couple of nits about that, but it's fun to learn how to do it differently, when you've been doing the same thing for a long time.
Right. So, and I apologize if I'm making you repeat yourself, but a lot of distributions that you come on with, they're either, specialized to some point, or they're for a certain audience. Manjaro, what is essentially the appeal of this one? Is it just another version of an all-encompassing, kind of replace your operating system with this one, or is it for people with, lesser hardware, or is it for people who are, I don't know, coffee addicts, whatever it may be? What is the appeal of this one?
We're all coffee addicts in this.
Absolutely. But what is the appeal of this one?
I almost have to go back a few spaces here. If you take a look at the Ubuntus of the world, and some of the distributions that are based on Ubuntu, and I mentioned Netrunner at one point there, I've mentioned several on the show over time. Linux Mint, for instance, is based on Ubuntu, with its own additions and its own reskinning and its own way of doing things just a little bit differently to make things a little bit easier for users out of the box than you get even with an Ubuntu distribution. And Linux Mint does a fabulous job of doing that. But all of them go back to an ancestor, so to speak. And the ancestor of Ubuntu is Debian, Debian. It's where it all began. The ancestor of Fedora, and for that matter, OpenSUSE and so forth, is Red Hat. Even before those guys came along, it was Red Hat with their RPM-based system. And one of the other distributions that showed up somewhere along the way with a completely different package manager. The package manager is the tool that you use to install software on the system, was Arch Linux, ARCH, Arch Linux. And Arch Linux was cool, but it didn't, at least in the beginning, didn't have a reputation for being particularly friendly. It was very much a geeky experimenter's sort of distribution, even at a time where other distributions had come along and sleeked up dramatically for the marketplace, to be perfectly honest, to become business friendly and desktop friendly and so forth. And of course, there are some, I'm sure there's still people out there who are running Slackware, for instance. So there are these ancestor distributions, if you will. Now, what's interesting, and there aren't just those four, there are others as well. I could spend a lot of time going into all of them, but we're not going to do that. Manjaro was kind of this idea. It's like, okay, how can we take everything that's great about Arch Linux and package it up in a way that's really great and friendly and accessible, in the same way that Linux Mint decided to take everything that they thought was great in Ubuntu and come up with something that was a little bit slicker and a little bit, and a little bit better. And you can argue as to whether they were successful or not. That's really not the point. But the idea is, here's a great, really good looking, really friendly Linux distribution based on, Arch Linux under the surface. It's called Manjaro, and that's what I'm running at the moment. It's some of the default software that gets installed. Remember what I said, like, it doesn't matter what's installed in it. You get to pick and choose what you want. If it turns out that there's a tool that you really like to use, that you like to have at your disposal, and it's not there, it's in the repositories. You can install it, right?
So, yeah, go for it. And and I think we can kind of take a lot for granted for what's similar, but tell me about some of these little pain points, these little nits that you seem to find, because you said this is fundamentally just a little bit off of what you're used to.
Yeah, it is. It is. First of all, I thought that the choice of default software on it was kind of interesting. I mentioned that, like, if you take a look at the the web browser, they included Cupzilla, and and of course I was sitting there hunting for Firefox or Google Chrome. It's like, well, I don't have those things available. The applications that are installed in it tend to be things that they found are perhaps lighter. I think they definitely went for lighter, more efficient type software. Like, for instance, they use VLC for a media player as opposed to using the things like the Dragon player, which is included in KDE distributions. And really, it's a KDE/Plasma based distribution, but mostly just the desktop is KDE Plasma, and then they bring in a bunch of tools that they think are lighter, slicker, faster, for whatever they're doing. Now, I have no objections with their choice of software. It may not be what I'm used to running. I've actually gotten a little fond of Cupzilla. I've been using it a fair bit, so apparently I've grown somewhat fond of it. But the package manager took me a while to get used to, because in my head I can just sort of, without even thinking about it, I can go down to the command line and I can install, I can search for and install packages in RPM and apt, Debian-based packages, and I don't even have to think about it. In Arch Linux and of course Manjaro here, it is something called Pacman. Seriously,
I know that name, right?
Joke there somewhere,
right?
Pacman, and of course, I'm not used to the command line switches for Pacman, so I've had to learn that. And then I discovered that some of the packages that are not in the base distribution, okay, as in the base distribution's repository. You remember what I mean by a repository, right?
Right. Yeah, the place where you keep all the
like every distribution has kind of like their master library of software that you can download for your particular operating system. So that's a repository. Now, in their repository, they don't necessarily have some of the things that I like. Like, they didn't have, OBS, and they didn't have Plex Media Server, which I use to, stream, some of my media content to other parts of the house. So they didn't have those things. But they have yet another command line program called YAOURT, which will query other distributions, typically RPM-based distributions, download it, take it apart, repackage it into something that Manjaro likes, and then install it, which is cool because you can get pretty much anything you like that way. Okay, but now I have to think in terms of two different ways of getting my software, and that's a nit that even as a guy who works with this stuff regularly, who's comfortable in this world, drives me a little bonkers. And the graphical installer is called Octopi, which we can have an argument about whether the plural or the singular is right or wrong here. Right. It actually looks like a Pac-Man ghost. In fact, my son, my younger son, my 10-year-old, looked at it on the screen and he said, "Why have you got a Pac-Man ghost at the bottom of your screen?" And I have a Pac-Man ghost because if the ghost is green, then everything is fine. If it's yellow, it wants to be updated with particular software. If it's red, there are security updates. So there are all these different, colors of ghosts. They actually look like Pac-Man ghosts, despite the fact that the graphical program that you call up is called Octopi. Okay? So Octopi looks like a Pac-Man ghost.
Okay. Okay.
With me so far? So
Yeah.
I bring up Octopi, and Octopi only shows me the things that are in the Manjaro repository. So all the other things that I would install through Yaourt or Yaourt, Yaourt, okay, aren't there. Okay, they're not in that graphical thing. I can't search for them in that graphical thing. So I have to look for them there, find out that I don't have that thing. Then I go down to the command line and I type
Do you
YAOURT hyphen
think
capital S, the package name that I want to install, and boom, magically it appears.
do you think that is something that you feel is just your intuition saying this is how I'm used to it, or do you think that or would you classify that as this is probably the best way and they're doing it another way, as in this is a flaw or this is just something you're not used to?
I think that the Pac-Man, because it's, they're handling their own repository of stuff which isn't shared by every other RPM distribution, that isn't shared by every other Debian distribution, the way that, Ubuntu and Fedora and so forth do. I think there's a limit realistically to how many packages they can squeeze into that repository and keep on top of.
Mhm.
So what they've done is they've come up with, and I don't know if this is a Manjaro thing or an Arch Linux thing. I haven't dug into it enough to actually be able to answer that question. But I think what they've done is they've said, okay, we recognize that not everything is in our repository. So we've created this secondary tool for you to go out and pull in these things that you may want that aren't in our repository, in our central repository. Okay. And it's a good solution in the sense that it works really well. Okay. I mean, I've used it and it works. I mean, I've used it several times now because I've installed a bunch of packages like OBS, for instance,
Right.
one of our favorites there. And Plex Media Server, software that I wanted to have that wasn't in there. I installed on my system without error, without any problems, but I had to go through this weird external route to be able to do it.
Sounds like they're
Okay.
trying to leverage all the work being done by the others, because obviously, you can't, just like a new phone trying to access or, create their own ecosystem, that is much, much harder and at this point pretty much impossible considering the backlog that's already available. It sounds like this new or, this different product is trying to leverage what's already out there and just make itself better just by the fact that it can, that it can do that.
I actually, in the end, YAOURT actually used Pac-Man because, like I said, it takes the package that it picked up elsewhere, takes it apart, repackages it into something that can be installed by Pac-Man. So in a sense, Pac-Man winds up installing it anyway. Okay, so that still happens regardless, but there's this additional step, and if I could have my my dream wish list for fixing, if you'll pardon the expression, this part of it, it would be okay. I know that you're pointing somewhere else for these extra packages. You obviously know enough to go looking elsewhere for these things. Just put everything under the same dang graphical interface, okay, software center, whatever you want to call it. And I don't care how you install it.
So, and with that, we have like all of like 6 minutes. I really want to get to the story about your son. So,
Yes.
let's put a bow on Manjaro Linux. How long do you think you're going to stick with this?
I don't know. I mean, let's put it this way. I mean, I typically stick, somewhere between 4 and 6 months before I try something different anyway. But I have to admit, all in all, I'm enjoying it. Despite my nit here, I mean, I'm enjoying it. I'm liking Manjaro, and I find that the community out there, the Arch Linux / Manjaro community, is extremely active and extremely helpful, and and they want this to be a real thing.
Right.
And I like that. I mean, I think that that's great, but we'll leave it at that. And I don't know how long I'll stick with it, but right now I'm not unhappy. In fact, I'm pleased right now. So not running
That's
away
good to
right
hear.
now.
That's good to hear. So, and everyone, again, we're gonna have a link to that in the show notes if you want to check it out. And hey, if you're a Linux user, then you are used to switching up distributions. So, I think to a lot of people out there who aren't Linux users, when we say, hey, if you want to check out this new operating system, sounds monumental to a Windows user, but to a Linux user, not that big a deal. So
I don't think it's that monumental to a Windows user either. I think if you boot up, especially since all these things have live CDs that you can boot up off
are you
of.
kidding me? There were riots in the street when they said they were stopping support for Windows 7 and 8 only for Windows 10. People were losing their minds.
I wasn't talking about Windows. I was talking about Linux.
I know. So anyway, so that aside, why don't we go ahead and in these last couple minutes talk about your son and the fact that he's a YouTuber.
Son, my youngest is a YouTuber. He actually, in fact, if you want to check out my son's, he has a YouTube channel. So
Sure.
So I don't think you'll have any trouble with me pushing his channel.
How dare the public find his public forum?
How did he exactly? The kid's got like 200 videos. I think he may have more than I do at the moment.
Very cool.
And he's been publishing YouTube videos for like over 2 years now. He's got some stop motion stuff, some gameplay stuff. Some of it is just him chasing his cats around with a camera. There's like he's done all sorts of really interesting things, and he experiments as well. His channel is Trisodin529, Trisodin, Tris Odin 529. He says 529 is one of his favorite numbers, so it's at the end of Trisodin. I don't know why, but that's it. Trisodin 529. Anyway, so he has been he's been getting into the idea of, I want more subscribers, because he's got like 120 subscribers, and he wants 120,000. But he's just starting out and so forth. So by the way, everybody out there, please subscribe to my channel, Free Thinker at Large. But please, if you want to ignore me completely, subscribe to my son's channel, Trisodin529. There you go. See, that's the love of a dad.
No, very good. Of course, we'll include this in the show notes. But and again, running real short on time here.
Yeah, real short.
So custom thumbnails.
So he's decided that he needs to make custom thumbnails for his videos, because one of the YouTube things is like, if you want people to recognize your channel, and branding, blah blah blah, you make custom thumbnails for your videos. So he's got an idea. I have to make custom thumbnails. Right behind, I have to learn how to do 2D animation, and I installed a 2D animation program on his Linux PC. Yes, my 10-year-old son runs a Linux desktop. It's sitting right beside me here. Like, he sits at the table beside me and works on his Linux PC. Okay, So if my 10-year-old can do it, you can do it. Anyway, so he wants to do this. So he said, well, how can I do this? Right after, he spent like a day and a half learning how to do a red dot moving back and forth across the screen a la Knight Rider, if you remember that show. And that's his 2D animation so far. But now he wants to do these custom thumbnails. So he said, well, what program can I use? And it's like, I want to do this, I want to do that. So I said, okay, first of all, you want a place where you can find a lot of great free images, like free as in royalty free. You're not going to get in trouble for using them. And the place to go is pixabay.com, Pixabay.com. I love Pixabay, by the way. I recommend it for everybody out there. It's a wonderful site. You don't have to spend money. If you've got a few bucks to spare to support them, great. I'm not associated with them in any way, but I love them. Okay, so I told them, first of all, you go out there. Second of all, you need a program to be able to manipulate images, and create these thumbnails and add text and stuff like that. And what you want to use is the Gimp. The GNU image manipulation program, the Gimp software, which is basically Adobe Photoshop, if you'll pardon the expression, for Linux. Okay, and then he says, can you teach me how to use it? And I told you this at the beginning. If you were recording me at the time, you probably would have seen flames appear in my eyes as the devil behind me came to life.
Because he's barking up the right tree.
Because not only is he barking, and I said, of course I'll help you learn how to use the GIMP. And I went to the bookshelf and I grabbed one of my books.
What was that? Moving to the Linux.
This one is Moving to the Linux Business Desktop.
Right.
I could have grabbed Moving to Ubuntu or Moving to Linux, Kiss the Blue Screen of Death Goodbye. This just is the one that I happened to grab first. And I went to the index and I looked up the GIMP and I said, okay, well, let me see. The GIMP is page 500 and whatever it is. There we go. And I said, okay, I'm going to teach you how to use this. Read the next 10 pages of this book.
And hey, you've done the research, and Marcel, I hate to do this to you, but we are just flat out of time. That's what the music means. But yeah, absolutely. By the way, everyone out there, Marcel Gagne, he is an author. He is published and he does write Linux books. So in the meantime, Marcel, I want to thank you so much for doing this short notice. And, you know, again, thanks for coming on. And any last words?
Oh, no last words. You know, you can find me on cookingwithlinux.com, or you can find me Freethinker at Large on YouTube, or you can find WFTL, that's Writer and Freethinker at Large, WFTL, on Twitter, or for that matter, you can just go to marcelgagne.com, which is my own personal website. So there you go.
There you go. So everyone, and thank you for tuning into Computer America, and of course, catch us tomorrow on the show as we have, I believe it's Ralph Bond, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Ralph Bond, regular correspondent here. And everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye-bye.